like if relationships aren't necessarily good at this age, why is the temptation so big?
Yeah, look, it's there's a few different ways of thinking about it. If you think about, like, say, the Garden of Eden, was God playing a practical joke on humanity and said, "Hey guys, here's this beautiful tree with a beautiful piece of fruit on it, and if you eat it, you're in trouble." Like, imagine I did that to my kids when I got home. So, hey guys, here's a chocolate cake on the dining table. If you touch it, you're dead. Is God playing a practical joke on his people? Is he being difficult? Why is he doing it? Because with that tree came the opportunity to choose, and came the opportunity to love, and the opportunity to be loyal. Without that choice, there can be no opportunity to do those things.
Welcome everybody to another episode of Beyond the Wars. We're very, very blessed today to have Abuna Elijah with us. Abuna, if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jacob. So I'm Father Elijah. I serve at St. Mark's. I'm very happy to be with you, and especially happy to be back where I went to school many, many years ago. So thanks very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Alicia, you look lovely in your school uniform. Joey and Jacob, I don't know what's going on.
Jersey Day for context.
It's fine.
Okay. And what jersey have you got on, Joey?
I decided to go for Sydney.
Sydney FC. Very good.
Yeah.
No question. No one needs to ask about that. Classic Friends jersey.
All right. So today's episode of Abuna, we're going to be talking about relationships, dating in school, and relationships in general. It's a pretty big, topic amongst the students, and I think it's a topic that people think about but don't really talk about too much. So yeah, we just wanted to go over this topic. First of all, the first question I want to ask you is very basic. Does the church allow dating in school? And what are the reasons for them not allowing or allowing that?
Yeah. I think when you say the church doesn't have a position statement on various things. What does the church think about Bitcoin? What does the church think about cloning? The church is not a political institution, is not, scientific institution. So it doesn't have a position statement on various things. So I guess I won't speak on behalf of the church, because I can't. But I'll just share with you, some thoughts. Yes, it's good to think about what is the ultimate purpose of dating. It's to assess suitability for marriage. We don't believe, in dating just to have fun, just because I'm lonely, just to satisfy, sexual desires. Its pure purpose is to assess, is this person suitable for me to marry or not? And so anything that is beyond the scope of that would not be pleasing to God, whether that happens now or later as well.
Yeah.
I think just to start us off, maybe it would be really nice to have a definition of what a relationship is. Like, what if two people just like each other and it's not known? What if two people like each other and it is known? Like, where's the grey line in between that?
Yeah, look, there's a spectrum. Okay, so you can have, boy A and girl A who they just treat each other like they would any other boy or girl in the planet. And then there's the, my heart skips a beat when I see him and like all this kind of business. And like we are committed to each other and we're in a relationship. And it doesn't just go from like this to this in a minute. There is a spectrum naturally. You notice them a little bit more. You're drawn to them. You find their jokes a whole lot funnier than everybody else does. Like there's a natural progression that, gets you there. What I would suggest is, be careful about no man's land, and especially spending time in no man's land for too long, because it's confusing and people get hurt. So 99.9% of your life should be spent with, I treat this person like any other person of the opposite gender under God's Son, or this is the person who I'm committed to. That's where 99.9% of your life should be. Some people spend 99.9% of their life, in this no man's land, sometimes with many other people. So be very wary about doing it.
Yeah, Abuna, the question that's been like circulating kind of is, what's the difference between the day of your HSC exam and the day after? What switches in that little segment between?
It's a very good question, and the answer is very little. And there is a assumption amongst the students that, oh, forget about this until you finish your HSC and then go for it. But that's not the case at all. You know, finishing your HSC does not automatically make somebody, you know, suitable to pursue a relationship which could potentially lead to marriage. You know, what are the criteria then? I mean, there's a few different domains that people have to think about. You know, spiritual maturity, they need to be emotionally mature. Their personality needs to be somewhat stable, because then my personality is still developing because I'm 17 years old. Then I don't know necessarily that the person that I'm attracted to now will be attractive forever. And also I have to be honest with that other person. Maybe the person that I am today will be different to who I'll be in 2 or 3 years' time, and that might not be the person that's suitable for them. Of course, there's practical and financial considerations, family considerations. So a lot of things need to be met. So yes, you know, generally it is very difficult for somebody to meet all of those criteria when they're 16 years old, for sure. Okay. But just because you're 18 and you just pens down on your chemistry paper because that's the last one this year, that doesn't automatically qualify you. You know, I guess I would summarize it this way, that finishing school, is probably necessary, but not sufficient to, you know, start a serious relationship that could lead to marriage.
All right. So what if I'm in that gray area that we were talking about before, where I do like a girl and she likes me back?
What's her name? I'm good.
Yeah, so like if I'm in that situation with Una and, you know, I can't stop thinking about it, and it has a toll on my studies, it has a toll on the time taken for like certain things, where do I go from there? Like
yeah. So look, it's something that everybody struggles with. You know, it's normal to have a crush. Okay. And you're not evil, you're not broken, because it's by God's design. Okay. You know, as we grow and mature as young people, you know, pass from childhood through puberty into maturity, it's not just your body that becomes, you know, different, but your mind. You know, simple evidence of that, we're at school today. I want you to go and walk past the Year 2 class and ask yourself a simple question. Are the Year 2s very aware of who's a boy and who's a girl? Not really. They don't really care. Now, let's go past the Year 11s. Are they aware of who's a boy and who's a girl? Of course they are, because their minds, it's not just their bodies that have changed, but their minds. And so you start to have, you know, sexual thoughts, sexual feelings, thoughts, notice things. It's normal. It's by God's design. But we are developing and not developed. And there is a time and a place for those things. And usually the time is not, you know, when I'm still at school, and the place is not here. So if I'm starting to have those thoughts and I don't want them, then you have to remember that thoughts and feelings are related. You know, modern psychology teaches, but this is the whole concept of cognitive behavioral therapy. So, you know, if you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. So, and a lot of the time we get that mixed up and we think, okay, well, look, I feel so strongly towards this person, and then that's driving my thoughts, and I can't control my feelings. But actually you can control your thoughts. So if you are thinking about them and think, wow, this is just the prettiest girl I've ever seen, and I think her first name would look so nice with my name. And you just, you know, imagine, and you just sit there and daydream about it for hours every single day. Then those thoughts are going to drive feelings, which will drive more thoughts. And then you find yourself in a cycle. Now, if you've identified that these thoughts, they are not helpful for me right now. I'm still maturing, but not mature. I'm still developing, but not developed. You know, I've got other priorities in my life at the moment, and so on and so forth. So that thought comes into your head. Then you violently remove the thought, forcefully, by prayer, by the sign of the cross, by doing something productive, you know, studying, serving, exercising. And so that thought that comes is not going to turn your whole mind upside down and then drive the emotions. So, in a sentence, I would say, if you're struggling with those feelings, then start with your thoughts.
So, Vona, we did like a slider with anonymous questions just for context. So, one of the questions were, what's the issue with growing up with someone over time prior to the completion of high school spiritually and getting to know them for a longer period of time, especially since the age for engagement has been lowered a lot?
Yeah. So look, I won't say it's impossible. It does happen, but some people who, start relationships in school proceed to marriage. But from my experience, it's less than 1%. But I won't say never, because it does happen. Now, why would I suggest to somebody not to, start a relationship at school? Because we touched on it already. But one of the things is suturing as well. We need to dig deep about why is it that I want to pursue a relationship with. For some people, it's not about strong attraction to that person, but it's a sense of loneliness. And I need to find a spiritual cure for that loneliness. For some people, it's actually lust. We talk, it's not suitable. We exchange pictures, which are not suitable. And sometimes things in person, and the relationship is just a vehicle to do that. So I need to dig deep about, what is the reason why, I'm pursuing. So am I pursuing a relationship for, for the right reasons, or is it a band-aid for something? And it's important to figure that out, because if I'm using it as a band-aid, then the relationship is destined to fail. Whether that's now in high school or in the future, by the way. If, a young woman who's of age, 25, 27, whatever, and says, okay, I'm going to date this boy because I'm lonely, or I'm going to date him because, that's what everybody else seems to be doing. She's suffering from the sin of a lack of contentment and comparison, then she's forever going to struggle with that. So there's a lot spiritually for us, to consider before, pursuing a relationship, and many other practical considerations as well. But I think, for the person who's very, very eager to pursue a relationship now, dig deep and ask, why? Why this person and why now? And be very honest with yourself, because maybe you won't like the answer.
I want to, in a hypothetical situation where we remove like the academic part of it, is it heavily focused on the spiritual part because you're not spiritually mature enough, or is it kind of like the no dating thing or no relationships, like a cultural tradition, or is it part of being a Christian? Like, where does it kind of lie?
Well, no, look, I think we have to live our lives as Christians and not swayed, by culture, positively or negatively. Okay, that's very important. Okay, we are Christians first and foremost, and Christians everywhere we go. So don't do something pointless because it's cultural, and also don't do something good because it's cultural. Like, we have to do good because that's what God has called us to do. So we have to really. So I really like that question. I don't believe that it's purely cultural. I guess simple evidence for that is if you ask any priest of my generation, what do you think about that? They were raised here and educated here. I think they all would say something very similar. So maybe they are product of environment as well and the cultural influence. But, I don't believe that it's purely cultural. There's definitely a spiritual component. But really, let me put it to you in a simple way. Joey, have you ever looked back at a picture of you 2 years ago and thought, what is that hairstyle? What am I wearing? Have you ever looked at a picture of you 2 years ago?
Definitely.
Plenty. Don't let that be a wife, man. You look at it 2 years ago, and so you're going to get stuck to somebody now, and then look at that in 2 years' time and be like, oh, what was I thinking? So we're still maturing, we're still developing, we're still growing, and there's actually, not to scare you, but when you're studying for an exam and you know what you need to study and you're stressed, there's a point before that, which is when you still don't know what you don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying no a lot. When you don't know what you don't know, that's so much more stressful. And when it comes to relationships, you don't know what you don't know yet. Okay, things about like conflict styles and attachment theory and, things about temperament and personality, things about intimacy, things about, your upbringing and the scars that we all inevitably have from that upbringing and how that influences, how we relate to people. there's just so many layers and layers and layers and layers. So first, I need to figure out my own layers, okay, spiritually and psychologically, emotionally, and then try to understand somebody else's layers, and then figure out, are those layers compatible? Okay, and so that's a very, very tricky thing to do when if you're doing SOR and Extension 3 English and whatever else you guys are doing.
Yeah. We're kind of playing devil's advocate, but like, is it not possible for me to grow with the person?
Yeah. So, yes, of course, it is possible to grow with the person, and there's a sweetness that comes with that. But at the same time, sometimes you grow with the person that you shouldn't grow with. You know? So, and this is like, because if you think about somebody suitable for me, I believe that you can grab any two random people, okay, and put them together, and the marriage can be functional. I believe that. And I believe that because of years of experience with, like, not my own experience, but in terms of like world history, arranged marriages, and, you know, maybe even your own grandparents or parents even might have, you know, didn't know each other, met for 5 minutes, and then they just dated, okay? So it can be done. But it's a lot harder than it needs to be a lot of the time. So, because couples generally fall into a number of categories. There's the best category is the one where my natural self is good enough for her, and her natural self is good enough for me 99% of the time. But then there's another extreme, which is my natural self is not good enough, and her natural self is not. I'll give you an example. Let's say the guy's a joker. Okay, he's a joker. He's the life of the party. He's just, you know. And then he dates a girl, and then she says, "Why do you have to embarrass me with your dumb jokes all the time? Can't you ever be serious? I can never rely on you." Like, he's like, "Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'll try harder." And then, you know, he's just a funny guy. And then he cracks the joke about her that she really doesn't like. And his natural self is just always letting her down. And he's trying, but failing. And then he dates another girl. Yeah. And she just finds him hilarious. And that's it. And that's the end of the conversation. Okay. So this idea of compatibility and figuring out who my natural self is and who the other person's natural self is, and whether those, you know, are compatible, is very, very important. Okay. And kind of growing together from the age of 16 or 15 or even younger, you might not actually have the wisdom to be able to see who is your true natural self and who's her true natural self. It's kind of been molded into each other. It's a bit to grow on your own a little bit first and assess that compatibility. Sorry, I'm harping on and on and on.
No, that's fine.
That's really interesting.
That's very good thing.
So do you believe in like the saying right person, wrong time?
No, I dislike that saying greatly, because, but look, this is just a personal opinion, because it's just, what do people do with them? Okay. So I meet a girl and I just say to her, look, you're just so beautiful and so special and so perfect, but it's the wrong time. What is she supposed to do with that? Is she supposed to just like forget about me? Well, that hurts very much because I think you're the right person. It's the wrong time. Is she supposed to just be heartbroken until I decide it's the right time in 1 year or 5 years or 10? You know, so that right person, wrong time. That's an example of the no man's land. You know,
Yeah,
it's not quite like any other person on the planet, and we're not quite in a relationship. Don't spend too much time there. People get hurt.
There's actually a question about it, and it says, waiting means these words lingering in the air and bottled feelings, which is worse because it takes up more time and energy. So what's the real issue with, you know, accelerating that process or preventing it from happening?
So again, just remember that the feelings are not necessarily, like, you're not a helpless victim of your feelings. Okay? You feel anxious, feel down, feel overwhelmed. You're not a helpless victim of your feelings. Okay? As the Bible tells us that we bring every thought captive to Christ. Okay? And so don't let your feelings dictate too much. So again, I would suggest to that person that speak to your parents, speak to your confession father, reflect, be prayerful yourself. Okay. And if you honestly believe that you have met all of those criteria, which are necessary to meet to commence a relationship in a mature way, in a godly way, in a pure way, right? Free of lust, with the consent of your parents, with the, supervision and approval of your confession father, be my guest. But I think that it's very unlikely that somebody can possibly meet all of those criteria. To be honest, not just now or even finishing, that time after HSC, everybody is in love with everybody and they come with their love stories, and they all fizzle out. So even just give yourselves a year or two, at least. Just because everybody's doing it young doesn't actually mean that it's wise to do that. Yeah.
Abuna, do we adopt these guidelines or rules from anything biblically, or did we just go through it throughout history from the Christian faith? Or how did this come to be?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. Maybe I'll ask you another question first, which is, what came first, the church or the Bible?
The church.
Tell me more.
After the resurrection.
Yes, exactly. And so when did the Bible come to be? So the Gospel of St. Mark was the earliest Gospel written, 40, 50 AD. The Gospel of St. John was the last one written, 90-ish AD. The Bible as we know it, was put together by St. Athanasius, 300s, So for 300 years, right, the church was in existence. And there was no Bible as we know it. There were letters floating around. St. Paul said, make sure you read this letter over here and this letter over there. But the Bible as we know it was not there for 300 years. So for us as Christians, especially as Orthodox Christians, it's not something that should disturb me greatly when there are things that are outside the Bible. It's only natural. Imagine 300 years. When was Federation in Australia? Australia is not 300 years old.
Oh.
Yeah. So imagine somebody came to you and just said, okay, we're going to put the Bible, the book, all right, and then just kind of ignore everything that's happened in the last 300 years. It's crazy. Yeah. So that's one very important principle. Another is the Bible gives us principles, that we then apply to our lives. For example, the Bible doesn't say anything about what to do if someone doesn't invite you to their birthday party and your birthday is next to it. The Bible doesn't say anything about, advances in science that are incomprehensible. The Bible says nothing about gender theory. But the Bible gives us principles, truths, realities, which the church then helps us to interpret, understand, relate, and apply in our modern world. So, of course, we're not going to find verses about this and that, but we don't need that to be so. The Bible has given us this vision of what marriage is, that it's a union between man and a woman. And St. Paul, when he's speaking about it in Ephesians, says, this is a great mystery that I speak concerning Christ and the church. He gave us marriage so that he could give humanity a clue about the relationship between Christ and the church. And spoke so much, about loyalty in marriage, loyalty in that covenant, and how a lack of loyalty or infidelity can completely break that. So this gives us so many clues about what it's supposed to look like. Again, thinking about young people getting together, a large part of that, is either driven by lust, or lust is the inevitable consequence of it. And so how can that possibly be, according to God's will and God's plan, when his intention in creating the institution of marriage was to give us an insight that God's covenant faithfulness to his church and the church's, love and submission and respect in return to that. So, sorry again, that was very long.
No, that was very nice.
If I have previously been in a relationship and I'm looking to make a change and I know it's not right, how can I move on knowing that it's affected my reputation or something like that?
If you feel like you're in a relationship which is not healthy, then be brave. And trust that no one who has made sacrifice for the sake of the Lord has ever lived to regret. Abraham was asked to leave his people. Did he regret doing that? The disciples left everything and followed him. Did they regret it? Pope Rose, lived in a windmill, Did you regret it? No one regrets anything. And God in his mercy accepts our offerings, big or small, whether that's, food during the Lent, or your whole life as a martyr, or anything in between. So offer something to the Lord this Lent and just say that this relationship is not pleasing to God. So be bold and trust in the Lord. The Lord will comfort you. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Okay? Have you ever thought about that in the context of mourning a sin? We mourn sometimes a beloved sin. I want to stop this, but I can't. I want to give this up, but it's hard. Okay? And there's a period of mourning. Blessed are you if you mourn because of the loss of a beloved sin, or you will be comforted. This is one way to reflect and contemplate on that. It's not the way, but one. And then also take drastic action. If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. Okay? So this is another very important thing. When people end relationships, whether again it's kind of in high school or later in life, Hollywood kind of gives us this idea about how it should be done. It's not you, it's me. Hope we can still be friends and stuff like that. Don't do that. Okay? Don't be friends. If there's somebody that you have a strong feeling for, somebody you've said things to, somebody that, there's shared intimacy with, you cannot be friends with that person the next day. You cannot. Okay? Because what ends up happening is you're going to get hurt again. So, okay, we can be friends. So then we talk. How are you feeling? Okay, I miss you. I miss you too. Well, why do we do this to each other? Let's start it. And before you know it, either you're in the same mess that you started with, okay, and going down the wrong track, or you've got to break up with them again. It's hard enough to break up with somebody. Don't do it twice. So I suggest that, if relationships are ending, there should be a period of little to no contact. A number of weeks, a number of months, for the intention of just setting those boundaries and making sure nobody gets hurt. And then we can sort of reassess it after that. Yeah. Thank you, friend.
So when we were having a discussion, in preparation for this, about, can you marry someone out of the Orthodox faith or Christian faith in general?
Yeah.
And I can only speak from the perspective of a female when entering into a relationship or a marriage. Of course, it's a partnership, but the male always, is the head of the house and, carries you almost to salvation in some aspect. And I think you mentioned martyrs, and we recently celebrated the commemoration of the 21 martyrs of Libya.
Yeah.
And in watching their families' responses on CYC, they posted them. Most of the martyrs' wives always say, he taught me how to fast, and he taught me to go to church, and he taught me how to give, alms. So if it's somebody who's changing or converting for you and is very new to the faith, how can that dynamic work?
So look, I think it's important that you choose somebody who is, a committed Christian. And that not every Coptic Christian automatically fits that criteria, of course. I think it's very important that, let me ask you guys a question. What is the most important? Most important criteria in a partner?
The spiritual journey.
No, I'm just there's no killer clauses, it's just, if you put the one.
I feel like I'd have to be attracted to them, and by their personality.
Their actions, probably.
Attracted to me.
Okay. Do you agree with that?
I'd say more if their actions, coincide with what they're saying.
Okay, so they're an authentic person.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
what do you think?
I agree with both.
All right. Look, that's true. Okay. People usually think Abuna wants to hear, that they love God and that they're a church goer and that they serve and that they sleep on the floor and stuff like that. Okay. But no, that's not the case at all. Because I could marry the most spiritual, holy, kind, loving woman who I can't stand that she can't stand me. And that's going to be miserable. Okay. So they have to love, and you have to love them. Okay. Now, they must also be spiritual and love God and have a, genuine relationship with that. And just because they were, born in the Coptic Orthodox faith does not automatically fulfill that criteria. And just because they were outside of that faith does not automatically disqualify them from that criteria as well. We've seen many people, who have, as you said, Alethea, got baptized for me. Okay. And sometimes that works, often it doesn't. But if people come, to Christ and love him and love his church and, are participating in the sacramental life of the church, whether they've come from a Christian background or otherwise, we have seen many cases of those people genuinely lead their families in a very, very godly way. So think about these two things, Does the person really love God? And do they really love me? Okay, you need both.
One of the questions from the slider is, is it wrong to initially pursue someone based on how they look?
So attraction is necessary, but not sufficient. Okay. So for the boys, okay, I want you to imagine, right? Your wife has got 4 kids. She's tired. She hasn't slept in 5 years. She hasn't been able to exercise as much as she used to. Right? She's feeling a bit self-conscious, and she looks and says to you, "Do I look nice?" What are you laughing at? You're going to pay for that for the next 100 years. You have to be able to look her in the eye and say, "You are the most beautiful girl I have ever seen." And that's true the first day you meet her up until the last day. Now, if you're struggling with that from day dot, it's going to be a problem. So attraction is important. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Now, again, if you think about it in terms of the spectrum, okay, sometimes people just put too much emphasis on attraction and, then they look over other very, very important things. Like, they're so attractive, but they don't love God. Oh, it's all right, they're so attractive. They're so attractive, they don't love me. Oh, but it's all right, they're so attractive. Yeah, that's crazy, okay? Now, you can't be in a relationship like that. Also, you look at the person and you just feel like, the most unattractive person you've seen that day, then again, that relationship can't start. But sometimes the person might not necessarily be the most attractive person you could ever imagine, but they're not horrible in your eyes. And so you start. And as the, companionship, friendship, emotional connection develops, then the attraction can, gradually increase. And you can assess that usually fairly quickly over a number of weeks, or months. Doesn't take longer than that. So avoid the extremes.
Okay. Abuna, how do you know if it's the right time to start going into these things? Because, like you said, there's no major difference between the last day of school and the first day when you're starting uni. So is there a specific timeline that you follow, like when you're mature enough or something? How do you know when it's the right time?
There's this expression where if you go into an expensive jewelry shop and then you see a ring and then there's no price tag on the ring, and then you ask the jeweler, "How much is the ring?" And then they say, "If you have to ask, you can't afford it." It's exactly the same. If you have to ask, then it's probably not the right time. Okay? Because people who are ready and mature are very, very sure of that and are very reflective and, receive advice from their confession father, from their parents. So if you're not sure, then it's probably better to err on the side of caution. I would consider some domains that my personality is mature and settled and stable, and I'm not regretting things I did and said 2 years ago, which are core parts of who I am. Spiritually, I'm on the right track. Emotionally, even in terms of your career and finances, I think your parents and your confession father also have to be on the same page. So don't ever start a relationship behind the back of, important people in your life, because it shows a lack of maturity. It shows a lack of seriousness. And it also sets up the relationship for failure. Even, let's say, Joe, you're dating a girl and she's just the best girl ever, but she's like, "Oh, I'm so scared to tell my dad," and then you just say, "All right, that's fine. We'll just keep it on the down low and not tell anybody for the next year." When her dad finds out, he doesn't even know who you are. He's going to hate you, right? So make sure that things are started in the correct way, with openness and transparency and honesty, with the guidance of important people in your life, and a few of those domains are met. And again, if in doubt, always better just to wait another day.
Yeah. So the last question is if relationships aren't necessarily good at this age, why is the temptation so big?
Look, it's there's a few different ways of thinking about it. If you think about, like, say, the Garden of Eden, was God playing a practical joke on humanity and said, "Hey guys, here's this beautiful tree with a beautiful piece of fruit on it, and if you eat it, you're in trouble." Like, imagine I did that to my kids when I got home. So, "Hey guys, here's a chocolate cake on the dining table. If you touch it, you're dead." Is God playing a practical joke on his people? Is he being difficult? Why is he doing it? Because with that tree came the opportunity to choose, and came the opportunity to love, and the opportunity to be loyal. Without that choice, there can be no opportunity to do those things. So a similar principle applies. The desire is strong, it's God-given, okay? But it's a chance for me to show my loyalty to God and to do something hard for Him, okay? Also, it's not new for me to have physical urges which can't be satisfied, okay? For example, you guys might be bored out of your brain from talking to me, but you can't exactly sleep on this table right now, okay? You might be hungry, okay, but we can't actually eat right now, So it's not, foreign. And it's actually a very dangerous concept. If every physical desire that I might have, I might, instantly satisfy, this is a very dangerous way to live, okay? Very dangerous way to live. Oh, this person annoys me. My physical desire, is to show him how strong some priests are, But that's a very dangerous, way to live. So it's a chance for you to show your love and your loyalty to God. And we train ourselves to bring our bodies into subjection, okay, rather than to be controlled by our bodies. And this has its place, in marriage, and it's holy, and it's, but it's not, it's not the time now. Another very interesting thing, actually, no, I'll talk about that another day.
No, you intrigued us.
Another day.
Okay, we don't have much time. So
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abuna.
Thank you, Abuna.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Looks like we'll have you again then.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Mona.
Thank you.